Srdja, thank you so much for talking to me. You were one of the people that I reached out to in 2022 when Iran was engulfed with anger and the protests, the woman life freedom protests, and I wanted to know what you thought about what was going on. And you had a sobering reaction to what at the time seemed very promising for many Iranians, including myself. And you said that this is not going to go anywhere. This is going to die down because it's not organized, because there are no demands, there are no clear plan for the future. And I was a bit offended. B, I realized you were right. So it did die down. And now this is post-protest period where over 500 people have been killed. Many are still in prison. Many activists have been silenced. And there's this sense of hopelessness. But then, to my surprise, you're not hopeless. And tell me why.
Okay, so let's start with 2020 and a way of protests and the conversation I had with you then and with a lot of people. I care about Iran. I'm touched to many people from Iran or people like you who are Iranians by origin and live somewhere else. And I think it's a very important country, not only in terms of geopolitics. It's also important because it embodies a lot of lessons that you can have about people fighting for freedom, people learning from their mistakes, oppressive regimes, learning and not learning, new waves to oppress, new waves to bypass oppression. So from my 20 years of my professional experience, once again back to 2020, when you take a look at any given protest movement, any given social movement, especially the large one, which sweeps the country, involves millions of people, you look at the 3 or 4 different elements, and if some of these elements are there, there is a pretty decent chance for success. What happened in Iran, and I will talk how and why important this is later when we kind of zoom out into the hope phase, is numbers. So numbers are tremendous, and the number of people engaged were tremendous. The demography, the geography of the people was tremendous. So this is not your typical, oppressive government, urban intellectuals in big centers are protesting while everybody else in the provinces is, quiet. It was along the ethnical lines. Remember, Mahsa Amini was coming from double oppressed. She was a different ethnicity and a woman. So there's like this double oppression, and nobody cared. People just stood for these kind of rights. But in the same time, if you want to win in nonviolent struggle, you need 3 things. You need vision and unity. There was certain unity within Iran. There was kind of no unity between Iran and the diaspora, which is my favorite topic I can talk about for hours. And but there was no clear idea, okay, this regime is bad, we are suffering, everybody's so angry. This is such an outdated system, the dinosaur of political system. Like Iran is like a dinosaur to me, in terms of who controls the things, non-elected people, role of religion, face of oppression, the way the education works, the level of corruption, the fact that you have all of these amazing resources, and I'm not talking about the oil, I'm talking about the human resources, because we're living in the era of the human talent. I mean, oil will expire happily one day, and still people live in misery. It's like all of these things were there, but there was obviously no clear idea, okay, we do this and then what? And I think formulating this thing is still the priority task number 1 for those who want democratic Iran, whether they live in Iran or they live somewhere else. Second element, which people very often forget, and this is where I poured cold water at you and poured cold water at many enthusiastic people. There are only 2 types of nonviolent revolutions in this world. They're either spontaneous or successful. So if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a strategy, if you don't see which pillars or institutions you're engaging, you're not capitalizing on engaging these institutions, then it's just the tide. And mobilization work, it's a water phenomenon. It operates in waves and in tides, and people go out, down, up. We've seen this in Iran over and over and over. And the last thing is organization discipline. You cannot defeat highly organized, trained and funded machine of an oppressive regime, and Iranian government is a highly organized and trained machine. Parts of this, they're falling apart, but part of them are like National Revolutionary Guard is like one that I'm looking at specifically. Without having some form of organization, grassroots organization, decision-making process, discipline, this is what you need. And of course, nonviolent discipline is the most important part of it. Iranians were largely nonviolent. This is why I'm not elaborating on this. So taking a look into these protests, however numbers are great, they're small now, but they will be great again. Once again, we will get to this stage where we have the mobilization. What you may need to win is figuring out, A, what's next? So, okay, if we pack all of these bad guys and put them in one plane and send them to live happily in Moscow or whoever takes them, what is there? How the new Iran looks? What's there for women? What's there for minorities? What's there for economy? What's there for youth? You have all of these brain people living country. What's there for accountability? Corruption is a big problem in Iran. So it's like you need answers to this question. Behind just this ideological thing, oh, do we want a kingdom or we want a republic? I think this is just the distraction. That part is just the distraction, and that distraction serves so people cannot get united. So speaking of 2020, the reason why I was skeptical that change will come in hype was that A, this is not a spontaneous process. You need to plan and strategize this process. I haven't seen elements of grassroots organization. I've seen a lot of grassroots mobilization though, which is a good fertile ground for organization. And I also didn't see the unity about this idea that, oh, okay, Khamenei goes down and then what? So zooming out in 2024 is taking a look into this once again. And that brings us back. I'm still very hopeful about Iran.
So that's where we differ, because you named all the problems. There's the Revolutionary Guards, there's lack of strategy. Then what makes you think that there is hope?
Okay, so, I mean, there is this thing the reason why we, as the organization, I'm running the organization called Canvas, and we are an educational institution focused on movement building. So this is very narrow arena of our work. These skills are there, and Iranians are clever people. They can learn how to organize, they can learn how to strategize, they can learn how to plan, and I have no doubt that the talent and commitment is there. How and whether they will do it, that's a different question. But moreover, taking a look into this situation, there are like some elements which make me pretty sure, and every time people ask me, it's like, what is the next big thing that will happen? And I always say Iran. I'm like, wow, but they're in war in Israel now, blah, 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 all of this kind of stuff. There are three elements of social change that are working towards the change in Iran. One, and for me most important, because the nonviolent struggle is a theory of numbers. And so when you take a look at this, there is a scientific research which proves that if you can mobilize between 3 and 5% of any given population, you have about 50% of the chance to succeed. 42 to be precise, but it's a very large percent. I mean, if the medicine will take away cancer for you, and people tell you, oh, it removes cancer in 42% of the cases, you'll try it, of course. It's like not 2%, it's 42%. So taking a look into this thing, you start by looking at the numbers, and numbers are on the side of the change. Iran is a very weird society for me in many different ways, but the way for me that the survival of this regime is bizarre is because you have a country of millions of young women ruled by very small number of old men. So first of all, this is not sustainable. when you take a look at the demographic pyramid of Iran and you see who are the people most committed to the change, you're looking into the younger generation. If you take a look at where the numbers are, average age in Iran is what, 25, 26? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Last time I checked, it was 26, it's probably even lower now. So you have the generation of the people that is coming, and this generation was born into this evil, corrupt regime. Mm-hmm. And this evil, corrupt regime relies on a narrative of Islamic revolution from 1989. How many people in Iran are born after 1989? Of course, you cannot sell them this old crap. And it's like taking a look into this, that leads you to the point where in the theory of numbers, you have more and more and more people who want change, and you have less and less and less people. Of course, if Iran is democracy, we'll have a change on the next ballot. But this is the reason why we don't have free and fair elections, if I can call this thing in Iran an elections. Like you need to be vetted by unelected people just to run for the office. I mean, I don't want to comment on this. But basically, the first and most important thing, you want to take a look at the demography. Demography doesn't work for Islamic Republic government. Demography works for change. Second thing, which is very important, you want to take a look at this demography, and you want to take a look at why I think this is unstoppable force. Okay, back to numbers. If you've ever organized a demonstration, and I did a bit of this in my younger years, every single security expert will teach you that to counter 10,000 people march, you need 200 to 300 of the well-trained, well-equipped riot police. So what happens is that within this theory of number, first of all, the concentration doesn't work, which is why the most effective tool for changing Iran will not be street protests, will be mass non-cooperation. So if you take a look at any kind of pillar analysis that the people done on it, I think taking a look into the, bar association strike, or taking a look into potential refinery strikes, this will be the very important and interesting place to look. But when you take a look at who is going to do it, you're always coming back to this video, which came from one of the madrasas, and I don't even remember the city, but there were plenty of these videos. And within these videos, you have this 14, 15, 16-year-old girls in madrasa, meaning the oppressed women were put in a school to teach to be obedient. So I'm not talking about the random people. I'm talking about the people who were already somehow put into this kind of brainwashing jail. And the Khamenei fought on the wall, and they're showing him the middle finger. So, well, guess what? They're like, how many of these girls? 2, 3 million? How many riot police you need by the theory to counter them? This is uncounterable. So it's like, second very important element of why I think this thing is hopeful is that now we have this very interesting reaction of the population, and you see signs of it. Aside of just seeing the signs of talent for tactics, like regime discourages dancing, let's make viral videos of dancing. Like going more into these small tactics, which are low risk but very viral, and they're put in a place where you can do a thing and still get away with it. This is so important. Understanding that numbers in nonviolent movements are not only built on streets, on basics of anger and mobilization. It's people are looking at what you are doing. They would do it because they agree with you on whatever specific topic, but they will first look at whether you get killed. And if you can do it and you can get away with it, they will try it. And this understanding that moving from A to B is where you want to be in tactical manner gives you hope that, these tactics will be replicated. Eventually, people will be recruited. Once again, there is lack of organization. That's a very important thing. They should be working far more on that. Lastly, there is this moment in time, and I remember being a relatively young student, maybe 18, 19 years, and my mother was your colleague. She was a Top Gun Serbian journalist, okay? And she was a well-educated, pretty popular woman at her age, kind of celebrity. And I remember her watching the state TV news during Milosevic's time, and I hear noise from a different room, and I go there and I see her arguing with the TV. Okay, screaming at the TV. Yes, the TVs had 3 dimensions at the time. They were not plasma like today, deep. Why is that important? Because this reminds me of a moment where, it's like the war in Gaza started and the regime was ready and they would put the American and Israeli flag on the street for people to step it, thus expressing whatever is the common stance of the government. People were bypassing these flags. Mm. And then you go to the football game, and then on the football game, place where you don't even have the young women because the women are banned from sport manifestations in Iran, yet again, very bizarre thing. Regime would come out with the Hamas flags, and you have tens of thousands of men, basically, who are in the stadium chanting something which in Farsi is roughly translated to me as roll up that flag and put it up your ass. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we are. Something that people probably intimately agree with, which is that, we have oppressed people in Palestine and Israeli army is bombing them. If regime gives you that, you will disagree because regime gives you that. Mm-hmm. And it's like that shows you the level to which the regime propaganda cannot penetrate the bones, the head bones of the people in Iran. So if you don't have numbers, which regime obviously doesn't have, if you don't have the ways to win the hearts and minds of the people, mm-hmm. What's left? Fear. Now we get to the fear. So there is a great guy called Will Dobson that I know who wrote an amazing book called Dictator's Learning Curve. Mm-hmm. So because the social change is such a dynamic process, you can observe how the different autocrats are learning to counter it. The most important lesson for them in 2011, that's what this book is about, it came out after the Arab Spring, is that fear is a very fragile stabilization factor. Because there is a moment in time when the bulb of fear explodes, and it is very difficult to put that spirit back in the bottle. And there are cases that we study, there are cases that we know. There's an amazing moment in, for example, Chilean history. Chileans had a marvelous guy called Pinochet, who was he was a proper dictator. And miners would go on a strike, and if people go and join them, they will be killed, simply killed by tanks. Even though armored vehicles were used. So fear, 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 fear. Brute force, brute force, brute force. And then there was a day in time where they decided to go a bypass, once again, low-risk tactics, amazing. And they decided to drive half speed, a certain amount of day, of course, in rush hour, and walk half speed. So that was the appeal. No whistles, no slogans, no flags, drive half speed, walk half speed. And I actually met the guy who was one of the organizers, and there is a live documentary called The Force More Powerful, where the guy speaks to the camera and he says, it's like just for the virtue of driving half speed and seeing everybody else is driving at half speed and seeing hundreds of thousands of people walking half speed and then honking each other and cheering each other, that verbal field just exploded. Because we figure out that we are the many and they are the few. And it's like, I can envision the moment like that in Iran, because people who want to change in Iran, they are many. This is a numbers game. Once again, this is fact. So getting back to this and the fear and the oppression, that brings us back to the rough science. If you take a look at contemporary dictatorships, they evolved. Mm-hmm. The reason why Xi is still a great leader of China and there is no dissent, it's not only because he became better in firewalling internet, face recognizing people or whatever. It's because he listens. Mm-hmm. There was a day in time where people were sick and tired with the zero COVID policy in China. And the small protests where people were holding the blank papers and stuff that stopped erupting. he figured out he scrapped the COVID policy in 2 weeks. That tells you he's learning. Take a look in another place, Iran. We have this problem. The women don't want to get scarred. What will we do? Beat, arrest, more morality police. Oh, it's not really working. We need to stop women on the streets and metro stations and see if they're properly scarred. So women will walk with their scarves off, and then they will scarf themselves, within this 10 yards, and then after 10 yards, they will unscarf themselves. Oh, this doesn't really work. You know what? We're going to find every shop where women work and are not scarred. And then in the apothecary shops in Iran, I've seen thousands of photos of this. People tend to send me these things. The men appeared scarred together with women. So now you're trying to impose the ban, which shows obedience of the women, and you walk in a shop and the man is scarred. The first thing you do, you laugh out loud because you know what it means. So that no words needed. Like, this is such a simple message. We, the men, stand in solidarity with women. So now by imposing this, you're building the unity. And then in the same time, you're looking ridiculous. And yes, women are scarred, but it's like your work of instilling fear is not done. So once again, getting back to this, if you want to instill fear, if you want to rule by oppression, we're getting back to this numbers game. Oppression is a very, very expensive toy. It takes a lot of money to keep millions of people at bay, yes? The more money you need to spend on this, the less drones you can fly to whatever, Syria, Israel, whatever. So now, and that brings us to the second problem of the regime, that the regime is broke. So once again, it is broke. It's like one of these bizarre things. And I always take Venezuela and Iran as an example and compare them to Norway. Imagine if Norwegian government is running Iran with all of their human and natural resources, or Venezuela. How would these societies look? And you know what will be the riches of the societies, the riches of the people, the quality of education. So the damn Norwegians, their grandsons and granddaughters, they have the retirement fund now. It's like, but then you have democratic government, which kind of is responsible to the people, and everybody knows where the money from oil is going. All the people in Iran see money from oil being siphoned from their ground without one single real invested in a local school. Because of course it goes in the pockets of the Revolutionary Guard people, or it goes to produce drones to do whatever proxy war. But I don't even know where it goes, but it goes somewhere. It doesn't stay there. So you have a shrinking budget. You have an outdated ideology. You lost tools to convince people even to step on Israeli flag. They would, if only you are not the one who want them to do it. It's like, this is very specific. So this is like, they wouldn't even do something they would do if you tell them to do it. This reminds me of my kids sometimes. And then lastly, your only tool is a fear. If you take a look at which dictatorship stabilized over the last decade, these are the dictatorship which needs to use the least of kinetic force. The more kinetic force you need to use, the more money it takes to keep people in bay. This is science. This is not hope. This is science. And when you put these things this way, and you put them together with the demographic pyramid of Iran, there are only two things that are lacking. One is the vision of future country. Another one is planning coped with the organization. I bet on Iranians that they will do both.
So
Did I explain it?
Yes, you explained it very well, and I'm partly convinced by your argument. The bit that still is lacking, and I think you agree about that, is this lack of organization. where the Iranian opposition should begin from, and bear in mind that many of the intellectuals and the thinkers are already in prison and have no means of communication with the outside world. So let's say I am a young, frustrated Iranian sitting at home watching this interview. What's your immediate advice for them?
Okay, first thing, bottom-up movements, and Iran, it's pretty clear that you will need some kind of horizontal, decentralized, bottom-up movements. There are so many reasons for this. One is, whoever raises her or his head, they will cut the head. It's like this is just a no-brainer. The other one, we're also living in the era where people mobilize and organize horizontally and over social media and over Telegram groups. So it's also a very popular age for decentralized movements. So first thing, your organizational model that will probably work the best in a place like Iran, and of course it's up to every single movement to develop what works best for them, is some kind of, what we did, I'll compare it to the Serbia, for example. So it's like what we did in Otpor, which was a large non-partisan movement that I helped co-found back there when I was younger and more beautiful and tall and blonde, was this idea that no, we cannot build a centralized pyramidal party type of organization because the regime is very structural and very hierarchical, and they will go after head, and then after arms, and then after knees. So they will go after national leadership, and then they will go after the leadership in certain cities and towns. So what we did was a kind of a people power thing where we had a very clear vision, which was a document called Declaration for Future of Serbia, very big name for 6 pages. And then we turned this document into some kind of organizing manifesto. So there was this thing which was available to everybody, which was aiming a pretty broad way goals, like we want freedom of expression, assembly, free and fair elections. We want some kind of, corruptless economy, or like the economical model from European Union, where, it's not important that you're in bed with somebody from government to get money. It's like, or job, it's your competence or the market and stuff like that. And the last part, very important for us, which also may relate a lot to Iranians, was that we wanted a peace with our neighbors. Like Serbia was torn into the 4 civil wars, 3 civil wars and a war with NATO. We were amazing. We're better than Iranians in getting in trouble. Our government was better. So taking a look into this, what you will probably need is figuring out that you need some kind of unifying strategic document. The way it was working in Serbia was that the principles were centralized in terms we knew what we wanted, and there was this little book that you can always read and see, we are going to do it through the free and fair elections, blah, blah, blah. There was kind of operational plan built into it. And just to give people the idea that, there is a strategy. This is not you protesting and then what. But there was a symbol, the clenched fist. So combination of broad principles, symbol, and the idea that everybody is a leader in her or his neighborhood. So it's your individual resistance. It's not the movement with leaders that will tell you what to do. It's you, Rana, feeling that you need to do something, and we are the vehicle. And by the way, this is where we are going, the manifest. So it's like, that sparked a very interesting organizational model, which was kind of built itself based on several principles. Strong vision, almost no hierarchy, which can be tackled, infiltrated, killed, arrested, demotivated, demoralized, bought off, whatever. But a very horizontal decision-making process based on local organizations that were doing their shit. And they knew the best what will work in this town or in that town instead of asking me in Belgrade, because they knew their neighbors better than I would do. And then this idea that It was called the Otpor from your neighborhood. This idea that you do small, local, decentralized actions like graffiti, or stickers, or hitting pots and pans at a certain time. It was the time of TV news. People hate TV news, so they didn't want to listen to TV news. They would go on the balconies and make noise. But that helps you identify your neighbors. And then you get together with your neighbors in a groups of 3 or 5, and then this 3 or 5 becomes the cell of resistance in that neighborhood. So this very wide decentralized model connected with a common goal and a symbol, because people like, physical branding. It was also connected with music, various forms of arts and stuff like that. It has this movement identity thing. So you can identify yourself with the goals, but you own them. The advantage of movements in 2024 is that unlike situations in the past, where it was more or less organized by a group or a labor union, or a political party, or a Roman Catholic Church, if we talk about the Polish Solidarity, these movements enable people to own them. And the more people are the owners of the movement and shareholders of the movement, if you want to use the corporate language, the more they're likely to invest, because they're investing into their thing. They're not investing in your thing or my thing. So basically this idea of building your goals into the short, readable, pretty broad document, connecting this with some kind of symbols and visuals, and then working where you are. Instead of thinking about, we need to build an organization where we are going to elect people and blah, 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 blah. During this process, regime will identify people and put them in jail, throw them out, buy them out, blackmail them, scare them, whatever. So it's also very problematic from the regime perspective, because there is an alternative. Alternative looks like a clenched fist or a color or something like that. There is a bunch of people doing it, but killing one of them here and one of them there doesn't really work, because you are not stopping the tide. So that, I think, may be something that the people in Iran who wish change are thinking of. Once again, it will not be done overnight. These two things itself, some kind of organization and a vision or a document, or answer to the question what after, these two things are not enough. There is a planning process. And looking into pillars of Iranian regime, I would always bet on 2. 1, local police that didn't want to kill protesters in 2020 to start with. And I've seen so many videos where people were going towards the local police, but the local police is pulling back. And they are not ordered to pull back. They are ordered to do something else. So understanding that your opponent is not only centralized, but also weak on the periphery. Getting to this idea of guerrilla warfare, where your power is that you engage them wherever you are. Like this idea that this is like we do it in neighborhood, and then there's a local policeman, and there is only that number of revolutionary guardists which can be sent on a certain number of the places in the same time. Then it becomes a chess game. And damn Iranians, they invested the chess, that they invented the chess, the Shah. We call it Shah also in Serbia. Yeah. So this game of chess where you're pressuring with pawns, and eventually you conquer the battlefield. So having all this in mind, the last piece of puzzle that I see, somebody needs to sit down and figure out which institutions are the most accessible to the movement, and some of them are obviously pretty accessible. You can do a protest on the university pretty quickly. Police will be quick to come. But once again, so understanding the educational institutions are already proven to be full of the people who want change. And then building it up towards the local police, especially building it up towards the oil sector. Because if you stop this is the last bloodline of that little money that regimes have. No refineries, no repression. Like repression will be able to roll for a little bit, but that's what it is. large numbers of young people throughout the country that is becoming larger day by day, absolute ineffectiveness of regime to shift their mind, and their more and more incapability to adopt and dependence on the kinetic force and fear, combined with the talent and the wish of the people on the ground. All we lack is skills to develop the vision, to think how you communicate the vision to the broad movement through music, art, slogans, colors, and then eventually understanding that on a strategic level, what is your order of engagement in terms of pillars, and on a tactical level, what can you do on the ground, which can be sticker, which can be ringtone. So what is the low-risk tactics that will keep people engaged and pressurized? Once again, when we take a look at these tactics, traditionally, and this is not the case only in Iran, the most effective tactics against the oppressive regime, when you have numbers, are not the tactics of protest and persuasion, are the tactics of non-cooperation, strikes, boycotts. Because if I boycott XYZ because it's produced by a member of the government, or it's used for, selling assets and abusing people, and you take a look at even more oppressive regime than the Iranian one, which is the Burmese junta. It's like somebody did a tactical mapping in Burma. And they figure out that out of 12 generals, and I often refer to this as autocracy, INC, they're incorporated. So there is this guy who owns the largest brewery in Burma, and he's the member of the ruling junta. So we take a look at the specific brands of beer that the Burmese people will not drink. And then we find that the largest single investor in this brewery is Asahi in Japan. So we pressure the investor to pull back. We stop drinking this beer. We kill the revenue. The brewery collapses and bankrupts. Now this guy is worse off. Now he's thinking, what the heck did I need this coup? I was better off before. And then they say, okay, after beer, here comes the cigarettes. They're looking, and they, of course, the largest brand of the Burmese cigarettes is owned by one of the members of the ruling. So why this is so effective? Because you cannot repress people to buy certain brand of beer or cigarettes. You can threaten them. They're not buying. You can kill them. They're still not buying. Just like when your only tool in your toolbox as a dictator is a kinetic force or hammer, but not every problem is a nail. So the problem is like everything looks like a nail, but not every problem is a nail. So shifting from concentration to dispersion, shifting from protest to non-cooperation. This is on a tactical level things that I will be thinking of.
You touched upon the diaspora, the Iranian diaspora, which is quite a sizable population. What can they do? And I'm sure you're aware of that alliance that was formed among some Iranian celebrities / activists and the son of the former king. That all fell apart after a few weeks. What's the role of the diaspora, and can they help in the sense of building an opposition outside the country, or the opposition has to come from inside?
Opposition from outside of the country, if united, strategic, focused on pressuring international community, moreover focused on using their freedom to do things where they can be done. Once again, Asahi is in Japan. It's like taking a look into tentacles. And how do we tackle tentacles in Iran? It's a small number of tentacles because Iran is over sanctioned now. It's like you don't really have this capability that you have. And unlike in Russia, Domino Pizza is not operating in Iran, so you cannot really protest here in front of Domino's Pizza and say, close your shop in Moscow because the bombs are killing Ukrainians. But lastly, raising money and sending it to those who are fighting in a country. Somebody told me once that Iranian diaspora put together is actually richer than the Iranian regime, which I kind of believe. The regime is pretty broke, and there are some pretty successful Iranians running the companies abroad. I don't know if it's correct, but it's probably like there are tremendous resources. and then using the tools to send them in country like cryptocurrency, I think these would be the most important things. Also understanding that, you know, as a diaspora, you cannot really puppet master things in the country, and nobody gives a shit if you elect a president or a king to rule you from diaspora. This is very naive and very arrogant type of thinking. If the change appears, it will appear through the people on the ground. People on the ground should have a full support of people in the diaspora. People in the diaspora should be focusing on what really helps the movement in the country, and if possible, avoid endless ideological discussions, because that makes them the part of the problem, not the part of the solution.
Many of those who are inside the country and have witnessed the violence that the regime has used against the protesters are convinced that non-violence is not going to work. They say we need guns, and in some cases they say we need foreign countries to intervene for us to succeed because we don't have the power to do this. These guys are going to kill us. What's your message to those people who no longer believe in non-violent resistance?
Messages both historically scientifical and practical. Historically, non-violent movements are twice more likely to succeed than the violent movements. Foreign military intervention doesn't bring democracy, only chaos. And luckily for Iran, they don't need to take a look further than Iraq to see, you know, how this experiment with, you know, getting tanks and getting Assad, getting Hussein down by the foreign military intervention really played off in the long term. Practically, it's a boxing game. It's like, I'm an old guy, so probably people in Iran haven't heard that once there was this crazily successful boxing champion named Mike Tyson. And he was known for, you know, wiping their opponents in a boxing ring down within the matter of minutes or seconds. And when I talk to the people who advocate this idea, you can go back to the Sun Tzu and say it's like you need to put your strong points, which is numbers, against your opponent's weak points, which is economy or, you know, potential disobedience or incapability to counter millions of people with a certain number of police. But you need to figure out, a regime in Iran is far more superior on the field of the armed struggle to the people. And this is what it is. So you want to deal with Mike Tyson, the famous boxer, the last place you will pick to challenge him is a boxing ring. You would rather try to outsmart him in chess, Scrabble, you know, game of cards, whatever, riddles, and this is where you have some living chance. When you enter the boxing ring, when you challenge the international, when you challenge a Revolutionary Guard with pathetic attempts of violence, you're going to lose. So not only that the non-violence is far more ethically superior, which it is, to the violence, it's also more likely to succeed. The main reason why it's most likely to succeed is because you are opposing the enemy whose only advantage is in a field of violence. So everything you can bypass, you are more likely to succeed. So no, violence is not the answer. I don't think it will do any good to the movement in Iran. It will certainly decrease the participation of the people, and that's one of the reasons why non-violent movements are so successful, is because you can recruit far more people for a simple non-violent action, regardless of their age, education, gender, and most importantly, foreign military intervention as a tool for bringing democracy. It's like, I would really like to see one case where foreign military intervention really brought democracy in the last 50 years. I'm not aware of one, but I would like to see where bombs brought democracy, and I would like to go to that place.
They don't have to be political scientists. They don't have to be seasoned political activists. It can be just a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds who sit there and put their ideas together and start something.
Okay.
That self-reliance that people, and then creativity. Realizing that it doesn't always have to be hundreds and thousands of people on the street and so many getting killed. There are other ways of doing this. Yeah.
So basically, the way it starts, it's these revolutions, they don't necessarily start with 100,000 people. It's like the Serbian movement was started by 11 people. The good news is these were people who were already experienced in protesting in 90s, so we had a certain knowledge and experience and knew what we should or we shouldn't do to start with. But basically the way it works is that the small core group understands that they're the milestones in the movement. And one of the first milestones is to get it to 100 or 200 people, which are territorially dispersed. And I'm not saying getting a demonstration of 200 people. It's getting 200 people who are daily committed to change. That's a very big difference. So once you have this core group of people, you need to figure out how to grow it. And the first thing you do when you want to grow it is take a look at your phone. So the first model of growing movement is called snowflake. So you are recruiting people that you already know, and then you go to the snowball, which is doing a small thing that people you don't know will notice. So identify the people you don't know that you can recruit for the movement. For this, and then you eventually gradually grow numbers. Then you look at the people in certain areas that you want to recruit, or with certain skills you want to recruit. Oh, we need a movement. Somebody needs to make a design. We need a designer. Somebody needs to create us a web page. Somebody needs to write a manifesto. Let's get a professor in. So this necessarily doesn't need to be a group of political science intellectuals, just to start with. And we were 20. Otpor was formed in 1988. I was 25 at the time, and I was the elder in the group, so there were people who were 22. Back to the world of how, one of the things that Iranians need to figure out that it is not about the concentration. It's like there's this whole family of tactics of concentration, which is how people originally imagined. So we all come to one square, we all come chant, protest, march, whatsoever. Tactics of concentration are great to show your numbers. They're also great to put a lot of pressure on one spot. Like, we had a series of demonstrations in Georgia this year because the government wants to push in a certain law. People come in front of the one place, tactic of concentration, parliament, at the time when lawmakers are voting about this law, and then when they win and persuade lawmakers not to vote in the law, they leave. So they don't stay there forever. If you take a look at the repertoire of tactics, and that brings us back to the numbers, there is a certain milestone in movements, which is 100 to 200 active people, like people who are thinking about it, they will commit themselves to it. With about 200 people, you can exercise more than 100 tactics. So the thing is, like, you take a look at your toolbox, and there is this book by Gene Sharp, which exists in Farsi. He defined almost 200 tactics back there in the 70s, and there are so many more which came out. We recently came out with a website called Tactics for Change, where you can really track how strategically planned low-risk tactics, which very often involve the element of creativity, dilemma, or humor, are actually making movements worldwide throughout the last 100 years more likely to succeed. The scientific research, 400 cases, database, university background, all this kind of stuff. So taking a look into one bucket of tactics, taking a look how you plan tactics, and then calculating your tactics towards your investment and cost. So the way you really make tactics successful in nonviolent struggle, kind of trains people, and this is what we do for a living, is understanding that you don't start with tactics, you start with target. So you know which institution, pillar, or group you're talking to. You know what you want them to do. Then, from there, you go one step back and say, what is the carrier of doing it? Because if you want to pressure the lawmakers in the parliament, you can do it in 50 different ways. You can organize one person to harass one lawmaker. You can make 100,000 phone calls to your lawmakers. You can assemble 100,000 people in front of the parliament, or 50 people in front of the parliament, or you can go to the constituencies of lawmakers, put the pressure where they represent people. Like, sky is the limit. If pressuring the lawmakers is what you want to achieve, once again, if this is the target, then you start discussing which tactic will work, which tactic will give a good turnout, and also in the case in Iran, what we can do and still get away with it. Because there is, the political, social space is shrinked. Regime is prone to breaking down demonstrations, arresting people, scaring people. So what is the thing that we can do to still put the pressure on a institution that we are looking at, that we can do and people don't get killed? Because you don't want people to get killed. You want to take care of your people. You want the solidarity in the movement, and you want the regime to be in the position where they are under pressure but incapable to use their hammer. And once again, they only have hammer, which is kinetic force, trials, like this oppression hammer. So there is at least 100 tactics on the list, which you can take a look at and say, oh wow, some of them will work in this case. And then you eliminate those that can bring to the oppression. And then you pick between those who are doable, and you wage what you are going to achieve. When you are doing tactics, you're looking at the set of things you want to achieve before you get engaged in the tactics. Some of these things are quantifiable. You want to achieve more shares on social media. You want to achieve more members. It's probably the most important thing, is that the tactics create new membership. If tactics don't create, like if you bring 100,000 people on the street and you don't recruit one single person, that's waste. So you need to measure this, because look, we are looking into the organization we are building now. For the organization, it's very important for us to recruit people, and then in their neighborhoods, they will make the cells. I'm repeating this story. That's like why we are doing this tactic, why we are not doing that tactic, what we can gain, what are the risks. And also with some tactics, there are some very interesting things that come in. Some of them are very creative, they inspire people. Some of them are replicable. You know why this dancing works? Because anybody can do it. And people are doing it, and they're seeing it from each other, and it has been replicated across the country. Once again, the very big problem for a hierarchical opponent, which doesn't know where this will pop up next. Unlike the demonstrations are announced, people are going to one spot, it's known days beforehand, it's announced on the social media or in the groups, in a chat, monitored, of course police is there. It's like you want to be like the water, and this is, I think, the term that Hong Kong protesters use. So you want to appear at all times, at all different places, and if your tool is to show umbrella as the symbol of the movement, then you're using umbrella. But then you are putting your opponent in a position that everybody with umbrella is perceived as the enemy. And you see this, you've seen this in a speech, like you want to study the This Flag movement of Zimbabwe, where, one viral video for a pastor made home video, came viral, came out with thousands of people in the street, and their symbol was national flag of Zimbabwe, which eventually led to the government of Zimbabwe banning street vendors from selling national flags. So you even overtake their symbol. And now this is the dilemma for the regime, because if wearing the national flag of Zimbabwe means you're opposing the government of Zimbabwe, then you're forced to arrest people for wearing the national flag of Zimbabwe and charge them with what? Exactly. I mean, how this is, a felony. It's like, once again, it's like, but we studied 400 tactics of that kind, and they exist on a website, and people can take a look. They can get certain ideas. Because the reason why these things are great is because they work for certain reason. And the reason why tactics work is not only because they are creative, is because somebody was thinking, what do I want to achieve? And when you achieve it, how this will impact the next thing I do. And when I do the next thing, well, I don't want to repeat myself, because then I will become predictable. And if I'm unpredictable, then I'm making a bigger, trouble for my opponent. And once again, if your opponent's only tool is kinetic force and propaganda that nobody listens to, then you can, it's like in Serbia, we abuse the state TV. It's so amazing. So you have this national television, which is a megaphone for the regime. It's 1998, I think, 1998, late 1998. And we are just a small movement of 11 people. And we want to announce the first time we march, the first time we wanted people to show on the street. And we didn't really know who will turn out. So most evil among us came to the idea that what we should do is copy-paste, because the regime, like in Iran, they had their puppet student organizations, their puppet school organized, like this, they fake NGOs, which are like there to keep people in bay and stuff. So we falsify the public statement of state-controlled student organizations. Like we just put it in a fake letterhead. And we send the statement in proper language that the state-controlled NGO would use to the state TV channel, saying, inviting people that they will not by any chance appear on the demonstration this evil, treacherous, CIA-funded organization, ourselves, the real ourselves, is organized. They read it. They double the numbers. With people listening to TV telling them not to go there, so that's a jiu-jitsu. You're using their tools to boost your numbers. And this is not the first time that's like taking a look into this database of things that worked. I mean, you have recent great anti-corporate things where, you would have Yes Man after the big scandal the Volkswagen made in the US with emissions and lying about emissions. And here comes the memo to all the main media in United States 2 days after the disaster and scandal, and everybody talks about it. And here comes the memo from Volkswagen itself to CNN desk office, wherever, and says, the managing board of Volkswagen expressed their deepest apology to the consumers in the United States. And of course, it looks genuine. It quotes what they should be saying, and it's fake. And now, if you're Volkswagen, what will you do? Will you apologize and thus do exactly what we want you to do? Or say, no, we are not apologizing. It's not us. So once again, the reason why this works is that somebody was thinking not only what to do, but what the opponent would do. I was putting a bet. It was, I think, 2 beer bet. When we were preparing this fake press release from a supposedly state-run student organization, say, if only we can copy this evil language, and we were so familiar with it, it was, on TV every day, if I can only sound like them very well, they will read it. They wouldn't even check, they would read it. Because what the TV was doing was just producing all of this and put it in this, meat grinding propaganda machinery, and they were so prone, these journalists, they're propagandists, they're not even the journalists, they were so prone of getting the same shit from pro-regime organizations, always in the same language, always targeting opponents, that they wouldn't even check. But you need to think like them in order for this to be successful. And how you can oppress that? You can oppress their stupidity. I mean, what? If somebody gets fired, it's a win for you. So once again, when you take a look into this, But this means understanding the pillar in this state, the pillar of the state media, and I bet Iranian state TV is no better than the Serbian state TV 90s. And understand that they are becoming your target, they are becoming your punchline, and they're becoming the machine for exposing their own stupidity. Because, you know, the normal people see this on TV and it's like, what? Once again, so in order to do this, you need to think behind, oh, let's get Russia on the street, because it will only get you killed.